One of the numerous skills of a social worker is the ability to empower and deliver effective interventions to vulnerable populations. Social workers work on micro, meso, and even macro levels when dealing with people as a part of vulnerable populations. On the micro level, they may have one-on-one counseling and intervention implementation with just that one person, maybe helping them deal with something that may not necessarily have to do with them being a part of a vulnerable population, but whatever problem has brought them forth to the social worker. On a meso level, there may be a family who is a minority or a part of one of the vulnerable populations I'll be discussing that may need some counseling or some help with their financial status. As well as on a macro level, this is more policy changes and administrative forums in the social work field. So a social worker who might work with vulnerable populations on a macro level may be trying to change policies such as how the right for same-sex marriages have just recently been passed throughout the United States. That could have been because of a social worker pushing policy. They could push the policies in their cities, their states, and eventually on a national level. In regards to vulnerable populations, when we say that, we're generally talking about somebody who is economically disadvantaged or a racial or ethnic minority within a society. And in general, some examples of people who can be considered a vulnerable population are children, the elderly, so if you're very young and you can't care for yourself, or people who get older, people who are having their social security so their income is limited, or who are in bad health at an older age and need assistance in taking care of themselves. Also, women are considered to be a vulnerable population, although there have been numerous things that women have overcome over the years in order to balance out the spectrum on like equality between men and women. There is still a wage gap there, which in turn considers women to be a part of a vulnerable population because they are generally disadvantaged and looked down upon in some work services. Racial minorities, which can differ between each society. There may be one society that is predominantly white, so anybody who is Asian or of African American descent is considered a minority, or there could be an area where Asian or African Americans are the predominant ethnicity and white may be considered a minority. Also, the mentally ill are considered to be a vulnerable population, as well as the physically handicapped. And also, as I mentioned before, about policies towards helping gay marriage be approved as a policy change, members of the LGBT community are considered to be a part of the vulnerable populations. So some critical issues that vulnerable populations face on day-to-day, some are policy-wise and others are just the stigmas that are attached to being a part of a vulnerable population. Some people are looked down upon, some are looked to being helpless. Where a social worker comes in is generally when I think of a social worker empowering someone, I think putting into your work the strengths-based perspective as number one from day one. You're going to meet with that person and you want to implement that strengths-based perspective right off the bat. And when using that perspective, you may have somebody who is disadvantaged and vulnerable, but you want to find their strengths. There can be someone who may be having a tough time finding work, but you want to find the strengths they have and build a concrete foundation for career options for them based on the skills that they have acquired over time. There may be someone who is like a part of a family, they may be a caretaker, an older sibling. So you may have somebody come to you who is a part of a vulnerable population, may not have a, say like a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, but they do have the experience in caregiving, taking care of younger siblings. You want to build upon that strength and help them find a possible career, not just a job. You don't want to help somebody find something that's just going to blow through. The ultimate goal is to help have them a stable life and a good standard of living. You want them to meet their optimal potential. So the strengths perspective lets them kind of oversee the bad things that are going on and hold above a good self-concept of themselves. And in general, when specifically on the micro level, when you're in counseling with somebody, to have them see something good about themselves where they may just be like drowning in all the bad things happening is a very important aspect of the treatment plan for somebody who is a part of a vulnerable population. On a meso level, you want to build those family strengths and build up from them. If there's a relationship within the family that's struggling, if you can find a strength in that family as a whole, those relationships are more likely to heal. And on a macro level, if you're looking at one population in general, if all these people are dealing with the same or similar problems on a regular basis, if these people band together and work towards a common goal, it's more likely that policies and things may change and in turn make this population not so vulnerable. Our society today is broad and it is modern. There are a lot of things changing, and I don't believe that anybody should be considered a vulnerable population in the world today. Although there are times where they are, and sometimes you can't get around that. But as a social worker, empowering those people to see above their vulnerability and into their strengths is extremely important.